Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Pearson, your elementary ELL teacher. Today we're going to do the oral and written retell for Curious George at School, First Grade Journeys, Lesson 3. So that means you're going to retell the story with your words, and we're going to read a written retell. So in this lesson, we're going to do turn and talk, where I ask you a question. You're going to think about your answer. If you have a partner or someone to talk to at home, you can talk with them and pair up with them, or you can be my virtual partner. And then you're going to share out your thinking and your answer in a complete sentence or sentences. So this says fantasy. Is Curious George a fantasy? And fantasy means things that cannot happen. Did the book have things that could not happen? Or the other type of literature is reality. Reality means things that can happen. Was this story real? It could have happened. Curious George went to school, or was it a fantasy because it could not happen? Well, Curious George is a fantasy story or fantasy genre type of literature. And in fantasy stories, some of our noticings, what we notice is fantasy stories are a make-believe story. Sometimes there are magical places. Sometimes magical things happen. Animals might act like humans, and that's what Curious George does. He acts like a human. Animals might wear clothes. There might be monsters, aliens, or dinosaurs. Animals might be extinct in real life. There can be events that can't happen, and the story might be funny. Well, I know that Curious George to me is a very funny story, and Curious George is an animal that acts like a human, and it really couldn't happen in real life because monkeys don't go to school and act like humans. So let's review our vocabulary words because we're going to use some of these in our retell and in answering our questions. Number 1, curious. Curious means eager to find out about things. Curious George was very curious. He was very eager to find out about things. Number 2, school, a place for learning and teaching. Number 3, this, that person or thing that is near. So Curious George may say, "This is my ball," or the girl may say, "This is my box." Number 4, kids. Kids are children, kids. Number 5, mess. A mess is something that is dirty or spilled over, mess. So we've got curious, school, this, kids, mess. Number 6, paints. Colorful liquids that are spread onto paper or other things, usually with the brush, paints. Number 7, job. A task or work to do, job. Number 8, funny. Funny means that something makes you laugh or smile, funny. Number 9, clean. To make something free of dirt, marks, or mess by washing, wiping, or brushing, clean. Number 10, helpful. Of service or assistance, useful, helpful. So number 6 was paints, 7, job, 8, funny, 9, clean, 10, helpful. Here's our learning target. Repeat after me. I can retell the story, Curious George at School, with my partner, using pictures, words, and sentences. Success criteria. That means how will you know you're successful at retelling the story Curious George using pictures, words, and sentences? Well, just like these people are climbing the mountain, we are climbing a learning mountain, and here's our steps to get to the top, to reach success. I will. Number 1, answer the talk about it questions. Number 2, say and match the characters and setting. Who is in the story? The characters. And the setting, where the story takes place. I will. Number 3, put the retelling pictures in the correct sequence or order. 4, say, write, or match the sentences to each picture, saying what happened first, later, and last. 5, say, write, or match the lesson or moral of the story. What did the character or characters learn? So let's review our turn and talk rules. If you have a partner at home, number 1, you're eye to eye, knee to knee. Number 2, first one person talks, the other person listens. So if you're my partner, make sure you listen to what my question is and what my answer is. If you have a partner, after they talk, then you talk. The next person talks, the other person listens. 4, do not talk too long on your turn, or your partner will not have time to have a turn. So you may think to yourself that you agree with your partner or with me, and you could say, I agree with you because, and say why, or I disagree with you, and say, I disagree with you because, and tell me why. So, number 1, here's the first major event in the story. Look at who is in the picture. Who is in the picture? Think about that. Where are they? What's the setting? So if you want, you can go back to your Journeys textbook and reread page 72 to answer the questions I'm about to give you. Number 1, where is George and the kids? What is happening? It says, where is George and the kids? What is happening? So you can say, they, or the kids and George are at, and tell me what's happening. They are at, and. So say it out loud, and I'll give you time to say it out loud. Well, they are at school, and it is the first day of school because it says, Mr. Apple says, welcome to the first day of school. 2, what are some ways the authors make George seem like a person? Remember, this is a fantasy story. Animals can act like people. George seems like a person because, tell me why he seems like a person. George seems like a person because, well, right, George seems like a person because he's standing and leading the class. It looks like he's wearing a medal or some sort of special prize around his neck, like he's the special helper of the day. And here's the second major event in the story. Look at what's going on. Who is in the picture? What is happening? And where are they? You can reread this and answer our questions on page 74 to 76 in the Journeys textbook. Number 1, why is there a mess on the floor and the table? Why is there a mess on the floor and the table? You can say, there is a mess because, and finish your thought. There is a mess because, well, if you remember, there's a mess because George was curious and he got into the paints and he was mixing them up and having fun. and he wasn't thinking about the mess that it would make. Now look at the next major event. You can reread it on pages 78 to 79 to answer these questions. What's going on in the picture? What's happening? Think about that. Number 1, what does George do to clean the mess? What does George do to clean the mess? And is he successful? So George, tell me what he does. George decides he is or he is not successful because, and tell me why. George, what does he do? He is, or choose, he is not successful because, and say it out loud. Well, George is so sad that he made a big mess and he wants to make it right. So he's curious and he goes and he looks and he finds this bucket and mop in the custodian closet. But guess what? He is not successful at cleaning the mess because his attempt makes it even more messy. He makes an even bigger mess. He can't do it on his own. So look at the picture. What's going on in the picture? You can reread about it on page 81 in your Journeys textbook. And our question is, how are the kids in the class helpful to George? How are the kids in the class helpful to George? So you're going to say the kids are helpful by, what are they doing? Or because the kids are helpful by, or the kids are helpful because, and finish your thought. Well, you can tell just in looking at the picture, the kids are helpful by helping George clean because they got some more cleaning supplies and decided to chip in and help. They saw that George was struggling and needed help, so they came to the rescue. So now we're going to retell the story. I'm going to say the sentence frames. I want you to say, complete it out loud. Retell of Curious George at School. So the first sentence, the main characters are, who are the main characters? The most important people or animals in the story. The main characters are, finish my thought. The main characters are, well, the main characters are George and the kids. There was also a teacher, but it was mostly George and the kids. The setting, where does the story take place? The setting is, where are they? The setting is a school. So let's put our pictures in the correct sequence. First, this happened. Then this happened. Later, this happened. And last, this happened. So think, think, think. First, say it out loud. What's happening? First, we talked about this picture. So tell me what's going on. First, it is the first day of school for Curious George and the kids. And notice I have the words school, curious, and kids highlighted, or they're in bold print because those are some of our vocabulary words. So it is the first day of school for Curious George and the kids. Then what happened? Then, tell me what's going on in the second picture. Then, George sees paints and is curious. He mixes them and makes a big mess. So then George sees paints and is curious. He mixes them and makes a big mess. And again, paints, curious, and mess are some of our selection vocabulary words. Later, what happens later after he makes a big mess? Well, later, George tries to clean the mess with a mop. The mess gets bigger. So later, George tries to clean the mess with a mop. The mess gets bigger. Last, what happens after that? Last, tell me what's going on in the story. Say last. Last, the kids at school are very helpful. The big mess gets clean. The kids at school are very helpful. The big mess gets clean. They all work together. So, in the end, Curious George learned that the kids were very, what do you think they were? Were they very unfriendly or were they very helpful? So in the end, Curious George learned that the kids were very, you got it, they were very helpful. Boys and girls, next, I want you to think about our learning target. I can retell the story, Curious George at School, with a partner using my words, pictures, and sentences. How did you do? 4, 3, 2, or 1? Just think to yourself, would you give yourself a 4? I could teach this lesson. I easily answered the questions with my partner and completed the Retell graphic organizer. 3, I was able to answer most of the questions with my partner and completed the Retell graphic organizer. 2, I was able to answer some of the questions and completed some of the graphic organizer. Or 1, I was not able to answer the questions and did not complete the graphic organizer. So now that you thought about your learning target, now I want you to think about how well did you hit the target by following classroom expectations, meaning the rules. How were you in participating? Did you do your best? 4, 3, 2, or 1? 4 would be, I'm an expert. I was fully engaged in trying. 3, I'm a master. I was mostly engaged in trying. 2, I'm an apprentice. I sometimes tried. Or 1, I'm a novice. I had a hard time participating today. Well, boys and girls, thank you for doing the oral and written retell with me about Curious George at School. I had fun. I hope you did too. Have a great day.